Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Alien Addict. I'm sorry we've been missed a couple of shows. I've missed some shows. Been a bit sick. Did a bit of a sick. I feel much better now. I have a voice. Didn't have a voice for a good week and a half. Some would say it was when I could have probably done my best work. Before we get into the show, I want to remind you that you can go and listen to this all on all the podcast places. Our Amazon feed isn't updating for some reason. So if you listen to us on Amazon and think, I don't know where the podcasts are, I don't know where your podcasts are either. So listen to us on Spotify, and that fixes that problem. Ollie is beavering away, moving house at the moment. But when he's moved house and all that's fine, we will be back with new t-shirts. So this is probably the last maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks before we bring some new podcasts. No, new t-shirts out. Obviously, the Alien Addict t-shirt will be there forever. Without further ado, David and our very special guest, Fringe. Welcome to Alien Addict.
Oh, good to see you guys again so soon.
It's good to see you again as well. For those people listening that might not listen to the audio show, which all of you should do, right now on Alien Addict, we have an audio exclusive interview with Fringe, which is kind of a follow-up on this. So if you enjoy this, go back and listen to the audio, and everything will make more sense to you. But it's kind of your fault because you should have listened to the audio podcast anyway. But maybe just for the live audience that didn't listen to our first show together, Fringe, do you want to give people a little quick synopsis of who you are and what your experiences were?
Even. I am 55 years old. I am retired from a career in law enforcement. I've been married for 26 years. My husband is also retired from a career in law enforcement. And actually, I'm not sure if I mentioned this last time, but both of us started having experiences with what we call in the UFO community non-human intelligence. Sometimes we say aliens, sometimes we say entities, sometimes we call it the phenomenon or phenomena. When we were children, obviously before we had even met each other, and quite possibly even started during the same year, despite about a 4 or 5 year age difference, 4-year age difference. And here I am just to tell my story and, to let other people know that there are literally millions of people around the world experiencing the very same things I'm experiencing. Just since finding a small UFO community on Twitter, I've been able to make contact with a lot of other people this is happening to. We are called alien abductees or alien experiencers or what have you. People kind of choose their own identification for, however they identify with those two different words because they're very different. But basically, a lot of the human beings on this planet are getting snatched out of their bed in the middle of the night, getting experimented on. All type of atrocities are happening to us. And it seems that the reason for what's happening is the creation of a hybrid race between what we refer to as aliens and humans. And I will refer to them as aliens, but just for the record, I don't think they're aliens at all. I usually put the word aliens in quotes because I do not think that they're from outer space or from other planets. I actually think they're from right here. And they've probably been living among us for a very long time. So that's me. That's my story. I put it out there a lot, despite the amount of abuse that I take on, social media platforms, because it's an important message. And like I said in the last interview, I think this is a topic that will be coming to the kitchen table, so to speak. Potentially within the next year, maybe it'll take 5 years. I'm not sure. But I think a lot of people will be talking about this topic. And I think that once people understand the depth of what's going on, it's going to be frightening for a lot of people. So that's why I'm here today. A lot of people say, well, why do you spend time trying to convince, people this is going on. And I'm really not doing that. I'm actually just putting out the information, trying to make other abductees understand that they're not alone, and let the chips fall where they may. I'm not here to force my beliefs on anyone or to even convince anyone to believe me. I just put the information out there, and someday, if your governments ever admit that this is happening and this is real, there will be people like me coming forward and saying, hey, don't forget about us. This is actually what's happening behind the nuts and bolts of UFO stuff that, someday might be disclosed by our government purposes.
So you're saying that through that statement is that the government is aware of this situation?
Oh, 100%. Absolutely.
Are they
and again, everything today I'm saying is my personal opinion. Absolutely. Yeah. They're aware. Yeah, for sure.
How so? How do you believe that they're involved with this or complicit?
Well, from my own personal experiences, there's a lot of what abductees refer to as MILABs, or ufology, UFO researchers will refer to as MILABs. And this is a military abduction. And those can happen in a couple of different ways. And so you have hundreds, if not thousands, of abductees saying the military is involved in some of their abductions. Mm-hmm. And then when I came to UFO Twitter, completely unaware of anything having to do with ufology or UFO research, I actually came across a whole lot of stuff on it. I mean, it's just been in the literature for decades, at least. Mm-hmm. Even if you look at just the abductee literature, you can go back to the 90s with Carla Turner with abductees saying that they're seeing military personnel in their abductions. I think it actually goes beyond military personnel. I mean, we call it MILABs, but in reality, these are probably contractors, black projects. It's not your average everyday military guy engaged in this kind of stuff. I would even go so far as to say our private corporations have probably outpaced our own black projects, and they have their own concern. So in my mind, there's absolutely no doubt that this is happening and that our government is very well aware of it. I mean, even if you just look at the David Grush stuff that came out last year, and the supposed 40 to 80 other whistleblowers waiting to come forward, the people who have testified in front of the interview. That's all stuff I don't pay a whole lot of attention to. But when you put the big picture together, you've got it coming from a bunch of different angles, that there's not a snowball's chance that they don't know. And by they, that they is a very general statement. We talk about a government being involved. This is obviously not every single person in every part of our government that's aware of what's going on.
So do you think the government is aware of this or complicit in it?
Well, both. I mean, if you look at just our Congress, our sitting Congress right now at this time, there's a lot of people who will say that they know at least the surface of what's going on. And then being complicit, we have abductions happening with military personnel working side by side with non-humans. And what can happen is it can be very confusing because you can have the so-called alien abduction with entities appearing as humans, but they're not really humans. And then you can have a military abduction where our military personnel are working side by side with non-humans. And this can happen inside a ship, it can happen underground, it can appear to be a military base. I mean, there's just so much going on that it can get very convoluted. And I think it can get confusing for abductees as well. I spent most of last year trying to stop my own abductions and spent a lot of time looking at what's actually happening here. Who are the players? What are the characters involved? And there's so much overlap. I almost came to believe it, and I'm really close to believing that at least what's happening to me is all one thing. Like it's just them working together for the common goal. I can't say that definitively because there's so much overlap that it can become hard to differentiate, what's what.
That feels like it might be something that's by design. It's by design to be confusing.
Absolutely. And then there are abductees I've spoken to who it can be very separate. So there are abductees who are actually abducted by what appears to be military personnel, to be interrogated over what they learned from the aliens, or what technology was being used, what information they were given. There are people who have a clear line with their abductions. I don't have that clear line, and a lot of people don't have that clear line. But there are some who do. There are some people who know what project they're in. You know, I worked with a gal, her name is Bridget. You might be interested in having her own podcast. She's got a phenomenal story, and she knows what project she's in. She has paperwork, and she's got all type of evidence for her case. She knows she was in Project Looking Glass in Stargate. She saw military personnel in military uniform. She will give you the name of a very high level person everyone knows and loves, who's actually the face of disclosure right now, who was running her project. And I don't want to tell her story for her or get it wrong, heaven forbid, but this is what's out there. And because of coming into this community of UFO Twitter, I've now had the opportunity to meet other people this is happening to. The stories are all over the place of people who thought that they were alone, and then you find out they're not. And this is happening to so many people.
So we're getting interesting questions. And that's kind of one of the best things about our being able to do this live with the audience. And the first one's Marcus Fishlock. Why does she think she's been chosen for this?
I don't consider it being chosen. I actually consider it a curse. So if you look at the research, and then just taking my own personal story, this is generational. It's generational for a lot of us. I would say most of us. I think there is, you know, your random opportunistic abduction from some random UFO somewhere. But for the most part, it's generational. This is happening to my mother. It's happening to my siblings. It's happening to my niece, children who are stepchildren, grandchildren. So it's happening generationally, and actually on both sides of the family. And so I have this on my father's side of the family, and I have this on my mother's side of the family. There are people who, you know, research abductees. There's a lot of times a military connection. A lot of times there's a connection to an intelligence agency somewhere in the family. There's this idea that Eisenhower, you know, met with the aliens and sold us out quite some time ago. I don't know if that's true or not, but it does seem to run generationally in bloodlines and in genetics. You know, there's some thought that they have maybe been messing with our genetics for perhaps even thousands of years, if not longer. But it's all about bloodlines and genetics. It's not about being chosen. It's actually a curse. I know there are abductees out there who think they're star seeds and they're here to, you know, bring the aliens message, which is alien propaganda 101. But I'm not sure there are any out there who wouldn't look deep down inside themselves and realize how much trauma they have been through, whether it's in the forefront of their minds or not. Abductees are subjected to a lot of trauma. And so to say that this is something being chosen, or that this is something good, in my opinion, is the universe.
Yeah, it's an affliction, not a selection. I got you. So S Hammers, and this was kind of out of order because we had another really good question, but this one popped up, which I think will lead into the next one. Do abductees get physically taken, or is it a spiritual abduction like an out-of-body experience?
Yeah, so it's both, and I would actually add a category there too.
Okay.
So abductions can be physical, where they take your physical body out of the physical environment into a physical spaceship, and they take your physical eggs and sperm, and they're making physical hybrids. Abductees can also be, I will refer to them as a soul abduction or an astral abduction, where they just take everything that's you, minus the physical body, out of the environment and into their environment. And yes, that can feel very much like an out-of-body experience. But the key here is that, I've said this before, and it's very difficult to explain. So there are different signs you can look for to see if you've had a physical abduction. If your clothes have been put back on backwards or inside out, you know, that's a clue that you've had a physical abduction. If you have grass in your bed or, you know, something like that, you could say, okay, this was physical. What I believe happened in my head was actually physical, because we now have physical evidence. However, there have been times when I have been fairly certain, even using a camera in my room, that I was not removed from the physical environment, yet came back with markings on my body. And so it's important to understand that what they can do with your astral energy subtle body can actually translate into the physical body. Either that, or they have a way of making people disappearing without anybody ever knowing. So, it's one or the other. I tend to think that a lot of times, even when they're just pulling the astral body out and doing their exams and all this nonsense that they do, what happens to the astral or spiritual body or the soul can actually transfer right back into the physical body. And it's an interesting conundrum. Then there are other times when they're I'll just slip the third one in there. They're just using virtual reality and nobody's gone anywhere.
Just quickly before we hit this question up, that reminds me a lot of the Freddy Krueger films. The way that people are hurt in dreams in those films. Now it has a physical manifestation. I'm fully of the belief, you see, that the entertainment industry, especially Hollywood, is very deeply involved in these things, and facts about what can happen to us like manifest and dribble their way into like pop culture and stuff like that. So I find that quite interesting.
And Freddy Krueger was apparently, unbeknownst to me, so I see these creatures who have that Freddy Krueger Stranger Things monster skin. And unbeknownst to me, I found this out at some point last year, Freddy Krueger was actually fashioned after Hatman. And have you guys ever talked about Hatman?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, well, I mean, I've spoken about this on this show before. I've actually had an experience where I believe I met Hatman during a psychedelic experience. That's quite interesting. It reminds me of what the people said people might see with the demon face disease that was being talked about a few months ago. Saying, people are going to see people with scars on their faces and stuff like that if you happen to have this disease. I find that it ties in quite a lot.
Be able to see through their facade, for sure. I mean, that could actually be a real disease. Look, there's something called sleep paralysis. That's a real phenomenon. It's whatever you want to call it, scientific phenomenon called sleep paralysis. But that doesn't negate the aliens actually being able to induce this paralysis and take us out of our bodies, or just float the physical body right up through the roof. So they have the technology that actually very much mimics the sleep paralysis. So to write off all sleep paralysis, I think, is a disservice to abductees and experiencers.
Yeah. And so for the follow-up question for the one from Hammers said, sorry, no, don't apologize, man. That was a great question. It's just the order works. I had to flip them, and it's not a commentary. It's great. We love the questions. Every now and then says, Fringe, complete respect for you. When you're abducted, does your husband notice you are physically gone from your house?
No, he has never noticed I was physically gone from my house, and nor have I noticed him being physically gone from the house, because my husband and I have actually been in very similar shared experiences. He has actually seen the creatures I've seen. He's been on a couple of the craft, or at least one of the craft that I have been on. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but his story around. So I slept with a camera in my bedroom from, I'm going to say October 2024, so October 2022 to about maybe February, March, and this is not 100% accurate. So maybe 4 or 5 months, I slept with a camera in my bedroom. It wasn't a great camera. It was a Canary infrared camera. The only thing I ever caught on this camera was what looks like orbs flying around the room, which somebody said that must be dust particles. Now, to me, it looked like it was obvious what was dust and what wasn't, but I don't know enough about it to say either way. And then just your typical glitches in the camera. So there were times when I would get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom and it didn't even register anything. And so the camera was obviously not 100%, although I don't know why it wouldn't work. And then there were times where and I'm only going to speak of one time in particular because this is the time where I was very, very confident of. I went to bed at night at this time, March, April of 2023. Maybe a month later, I was sleeping in a helmet. People have probably heard me talk about, I used to sleep in a helmet made of velostat, and at the end I actually added Faraday fabric to it. Because I ended up having so many experiences, I realized that they were using technology to get to me.
Mhm.
And so I was sleeping in this helmet. I put a baklava scarf over the helmet to keep it in place at night. I was meticulous about putting it on exactly the same way every night and looking at myself in the mirror and making sure, because at this point I'm Freddy Krueger nightmare status, and I really don't want to go to sleep, so I am meticulous. My camera was set to come on at 10 o'clock or something. It was in the night mode or something like that. And I got a notice that my camera had gone off of Wi-Fi, and I think it was about midnight. My husband had already fallen asleep. I get the notice, your camera is off of Wi-Fi. And I think, okay, well, I've got the helmet on, so I'm going to be okay. I'm protected because and this helmet's supposed to block the technology. So I go to sleep that night, and I wake up in the morning, and in the morning, I just knew something was wrong. Although, I mean, I could look at my journal to be sure, but I don't think I had any memories of any abduction experiences that night, although I would have to check on that, so don't anybody hold me to that. I wake up in the morning, I know something's wrong, and I look at my phone, and my camera was off for 3.5 hours, and I think it started at midnight and went to 3:30 a.m. or something like that. So my camera had been not connected to Wi-Fi. I woke up, my scarf that I put over my head, it's one of those two baklavas like people wear over their faces. My scarf was on wrong, and I was bleeding. I think it was my nose was bleeding, and I took pictures and everything. I don't have it right now, but I took pictures of it. And so that tells me if my scarf was put on wrong, and I have a bloody nose, and my camera was off for 3.5 hours, that's going to lend itself more to some type of physical interference than just taking my soul out of my body, or that's just happening in my own mind. So when those types of things happen, that's when it becomes easier to differentiate. Because honestly, most abductees are not necessarily even able to differentiate between a physical abduction and what I call soul abduction, where they're just taking yourself out of your body, where the consciousness is still working. And because the events seem so real and so physical, it would be hard to differentiate. Can you remind me of the question again? Because it's gone now. I just
No, you definitely covered it. Okay. And then this was a comment from Top Rad. Tell her thank you for an experience here, for stepping up and speaking her truth for all of us. Thanks.
Thanks, Top Rad. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and then there is Marcus Fishlock, who's a member of the channel. It says, so an advanced civilization abducted you and put your clothes on backwards? ?
Well, apparently so. So people look at these so-called aliens as being somehow all-powerful, omniscient, omnipotent, whatever. They look at them like gods, and they're just not. They are carrying out so many abductions every single night of the week, by the way, and they make mistakes, and they make a lot of mistakes. I mean, they fail to turn people off where people can have witnesses to their abductions. There are sightings where 20 people or more might see a sighting at the same time. People have been witnessed during abductions. There was a female, I can't remember what city it was, but it's a famous abduction where she's actually seen being floated out of her bedroom in an apartment building. And a lot of abductees not only return with their clothing on backwards, they might return with something missing. They could end up in someone else's house. Their clothing, say socks or underwear, might even be missing. And so to think, and I know that was probably a bit of a snide question, but that's okay, because I think we need to change our minds about these creatures and what they actually are.
I think there's a good way of looking at that question as well. the problem I think with that sort of thing is, especially when we talk about like advanced civilizations, is it always ends up drifting its way back towards the space brothers, that are they're just they're an advanced species that's made their way to Earth, and for some reason over the last however many decades have decided that they need to like scoop bits out of cows and borrow people every now and again, experiment on them and put us back, much in the same way as we would do wild animals. The only difference is I think as humans, well, the wild animals might have something different to say about this, but I think we generally have a slightly more respect for the animals and the environment that they happen to be in, like when we are observing different species. And the way I'd look at abductions more as, if you look at it more as almost like a sexual assault as opposed to a scientific investigation, people that assault people don't necessarily care how they leave the bodies afterwards.
Correct.
It to me it seems it's just like a complete disregard for the subject.
Well, I agree with you. It is a complete disregard. The only thing they care about is not getting caught. So when they make mistakes like that, they actually validate for the abductee that something is happening. It's actually very beneficial for an abductee to get some type of physical sign that this is actually happening to them. And they might as well be cosmic rapists. And oh my gosh, I'm not allowed to say that on whatever platform we're on. I apologize. Because they're committing actual sexual assaults on this craft and in the underground. So it's not just like it. It is that is what they're doing. And the only thing they care about is their agenda and the secrecy for now. I don't think that will last forever.
A quick question from me. Do you believe that the entities have the ability to take pleasure in what they're doing?
I think some of them do. So, you have stories about the Greys that they're just kind of robotic and they just go about their business and, there's not a whole lot of feeling there. But then there are also stories of Greys actually feeding off of the energy that comes from these encounters, including sexual encounters. And when I say sexual encounters, I'm talking about violent encounters, just to be clear. And then if you go up the food chain from there, absolutely, they're feeding off of a lot of this energy. The Greys are probably the most flat in their effect. But if you look at the abduction research, they have been seen absorbing nutrients with human blood and then absorbing our energy. They do this mind scan thing where they look into your eyes and they put you into a completely different place. This is the virtual reality type stuff that they're able to do. They're able to make you think you're somewhere you're actually not, and then they could actually feed off of that energy.
DW had a comment that happened to me when this came out when we were talking about abductions and things happening at night. That happened to me when I was a kid. Had a very vivid dream about an older kid in my room who nipped my leg. Had a V-shaped mark there since.
Yeah, and that's very common. And again, it's helpful because so much of this is relegated to the dream realm. Abductees will say, "Oh, I had this dream about UFOs and aliens, and I was on the ship," and then they'll say that it felt so real, but there's no option for it being real, so it has to stay in the dream realm. But like this, I'm not sure if this is a gentleman or a lady or whatever who just put that comment up. But when you wake up with marks on your body, it's helpful to categorize that something actually happened. Now, can you have, so you could have an instance, and actually an abductee told me this story, so I'm stealing it from her. You could be in a dream and smell something really bad in your dream, and then you wake up in the morning and realize your trash is actually really stinky. So you can have things that overlap into the dream. Maybe you actually do somehow, knock your own arm on your bedpost or something to get a bruise. These things are not impossible to happen. But when you establish a pattern of these strange things happening, believing that you're in a dream where you're abducted by aliens, and then you wake up with marks on your body, and you just start pulling all the pieces together, and you start realizing thousands of other people are saying this, and it's going to turn out that this is affecting millions of us across the planet. And you look at the abduction research. At some point, I hope people just keep an open enough mind where they just say, is it possible that this is actually happening? And this will help abductees as well, because we have no place to put this. It's either a dream or you're completely losing your mind. There's no other option. There's no option that this is actually real.
I think dreams aren't given enough credit. They're definitely not looked into enough. It's psychoanalyzed away. I got my own feelings about all that, but it is interesting. It definitely needs to be looked into, because I'm trying to follow a train there of thought, and I'm sure we'll get back to it. But to go through some of these that we have starred. Fringe, do you believe in paranormal extraterrestrials before your experiences?
I did. So I would have classified almost all of my experiences from the rest of my life up until I ended up being very conscious during these alien abductions up until I was maybe 51, 52 years old. I would have told you my life was paranormal. I had an incident at 3.5 years old where I woke up to alien creatures in my bedroom, which of course at that time I had no idea that anybody would call them aliens, but I just had these creatures in my room. At the age of 6 to 7, I actually had an entity living in my hand. Yes, I know how insane it sounds. But after finding the abduction research, I now know that the gray aliens will actually pretend to be other things, especially to get children. They'll pretend to be a cartoon character or, the Easter Bunny or something like that. Is it possible that's what was happening then, and I just didn't understand it possibly?
Do you think that's where imaginary friends come from a lot?
It could be, because even though when I told the story, if I ever did, so for instance, I think I told my husband this story, and maybe close family members just over the years. Oh yeah, I had this little green thing lived in my hand, and I would say, I know that you think this was an imaginary friend. I'm just telling you it wasn't. You don't have to believe me, because I know it sounds nuts. But my mom had an imaginary friend, and so did my grandmother. And so do a lot of abductees in childhood. A lot of abductees see ghosts, they see dead relatives, they see Jesus, they see religious figures, they see a lot of different things. But to get back to the question, I hope most of my life I would have considered paranormal, because I dealt with shadow beings. And I firmly believe these shadow beings were demonic, and that this was some type of evil entity coming after me. This was also happening to my siblings as well. It has happened to my mom. And so it wasn't until maybe this time last year or so that I started coming across other abductees in the abduction research. And there are abductees who have seen these shadow people actually using technology to turn into shadow beings. So they've seen the grays, the shorts, and the talls turn a technology on that turns them into shadow beings. And the shadow beings can be very, very solid, and sometimes they can look almost like astral shadow beings. So they can look a couple of different ways. But imagine my surprise when I found out that all of my life, the shadow beings have been messing with me relentlessly. And then actually before I even came across the abduction research, I started being conscious during my experiences, and they were taking me to the ships. And when I first came to this community called UFO Twitter, where you'll find my profile and spaces and such, I would tell these people in ufology, hey, just so you know, the shadow people are taking me to abductions. And they all thought I was nuts. And then I came across the abduction research and people like Ted Rice who have seen them use this technology. And it's not this one person who's seen it. So there's going to be a huge overlap between Hat Man, shadow beings, and the gray aliens, etc. Now, does that mean every single shadow being is a gray alien? No, that's not what I'm saying. But keep your mind open and understand that this has been seen by a lot of people.
Yeah. I know in our house, I have 5 kids. We take imaginary friends pretty seriously because we had an instance with an imaginary friend. I don't know if I've ever talked about it publicly. You're muted. You're muted, Lee. You're still muted, Lee.
That's normally Ollie's trick, isn't it?
Well, he's not here, so somebody has to fill that.
I think you've told me, Dave. I don't think you've said it on the show before.
Yeah. Well, and Lee can speak to this. He's been to my house. Him and Ollie both. I believe in security thoroughly. And I have redundancies for security. Like if the power goes out, doesn't matter. I still have 2 other forms that notify all my doors, all my windows, active, one active, and then 3 forms of passive. And the latest one that we added in was because of an instance. My daughter had an imaginary friend, and there were some instances going on with it. And I don't want to get too much because it's it's my actual life. The imaginary friend showed this. Geez, she was 4. How to bypass the security panel key code to get out of the house.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, it's pretty specific.
Pretty imaginative.
Yeah. But and it would have been like she didn't. And here's the thing: not only did it do that, there was an interference with the camera system and with the alert systems. So this is 2 separate systems that have nothing to do with each other. One has nothing to do with the internet. It's hardwired. It's won't, and the other one is. So it's and if the internet were to go down, it would pick up immediately on cellular, and it always notes. It notes every door. It'll note movement throughout the house. And we put in another one that's just layered extra, and now we have a big fence as well. But yeah, she had got outside and it was winter, and we were asleep. It was very, very early in the morning, and it didn't alert us that anything was out. Didn't alert us that anything was happening. And she said her friend was trying to take her to have fun so they could have fun together forever.
Oh, that's fantastic. Maybe the audience will start taking imaginary friends a little bit more seriously.
Oh, we've always taken them seriously, and we always told her that her imaginary, and this is the kicker. The imaginary friend is not allowed in the house, right? She's not allowed in the house, not allowed in the yard. She's not supposed to play with it. Like, this is what we had told her back then. And so we were asking, how did your imaginary friend, like, how did this happen? And she had said that the imaginary friend was floating around outside and woke her up. And like she was, because I live in a old, big home, and there's windows and stuff everywhere. And she was like, she couldn't explain it. She was telling me through the window what I needed to do, and that's how it was pretty phenomenal. It was pretty phenomenal. Anyway, our neighbor had saw her and like, I don't know why she was out early that morning. And yeah.
And that's the kind of thing that happens with abductees. You say, oh, they don't ever make a mistake. You have this high advanced, civilization. How ridiculous is it that they could put your pants on backwards? It happens. And these are the things that keep us sane, right? These are the things that give us, like what happened to your daughter. As horrible as it is, you actually had evidence of what she was saying was true.
Oh, the craziest part was, we were in full freak out mode. And we got in and we're like, what are you doing? And she just kind of zoned out and went back and passed out in her bed.
Yeah. Very common.
Yeah.
So, wow.
Then, yeah. So
we
here's
make
this.
fun of imaginary friends, but we really shouldn't. I put a post out not too long ago.
Yeah.
And it said, if your child has an imaginary friend or they're afraid of something living underneath their bed or in their closet, just listen, take them seriously.
Yeah. Oh, for personal reasons, we've always taken these things very seriously. The Moonin. Hello, thanks for sharing. How do you remember these experiences? For example, were you aware during it happening? Did you use hypnosis or something else? Thanks.
Yeah, so I've had hypnosis exactly one time, and it was for a past life regression that had, nothing to do with an abduction. So all of my abduction memories are actually just conscious memories. I actually got to the point this time last year, and a few months ahead of this time last year, where I was actually waking up at some times to full lucidity, as awake as I am right now talking to you. So I've never retrieved a abduction memory through regression. I actually have mixed feelings on regression. So on one hand, I think it was maybe August or September, late last year, I had booked a past life regression. I had gotten into this new age type stuff, regrettably, but I had to learn some lessons there as well. And I booked my husband a past life regression, and it was a year out waiting period. So when the past life regression came up, I had already kind of had my ideas on regression, etc. But because it was already paid for, I thought, you know what, I'm going to see what this is about, because in my head, I couldn't understand how people could retrieve memories that aren't there, that's not in their conscious mind. And so I went through this past life regression. I can't say that anything that happened during this regression, I would never be able to say that it actually happened or that it was true. It could have 100% been imagination, kind of filling in. So on one hand, I didn't have a lot of good things to say or think after my own regression. But on the other hand, before coming across the abduction material, I had had any number of things happening to me. It was getting to where it was 4 or 5 minutes a week. This stuff was happening to me. Silly things like going to the mall with aliens. Does that sound like something anyone would make up? I was at the mall with aliens last night. I was at Walmart with aliens last night. I was at a cocktail party. These 3 things had happened to me. I come across the abduction research, which most of the abduction research is obtained by regression. Carla Turner has a book out that most of her research was not obtained through regression, but if you look at someone like David Jacobs, almost all of it is obtained by regression. And I have someone I would consider a close friend who worked with David Jacobs, and she gets almost all of her information from regression. And so when I read in David Jacobs' material that is obtained largely through regression, I saw other abductees saying that they were going to the mall, that they had been to Walmart, and that they had been to cocktail parties. So these are things that are not glamorous, that are very difficult to get from anywhere in the media or in any kind of a movie, or even through the collective consciousness, or any other reason why this could be happening, would be a huge stretch when you have abductees who have not been regressed like me coming together with abductees who have been regressed, coming up with the same information. And so even though my memories are all conscious memories, they're not going to be as detailed. So what I have found is people who have regressed memories, they actually are going through detail step by step. Where we at, what happened, then what happened, then what happened, then what happened. For me, I will get a piece of what's happening. And then normally what happens with me is the more conscious I am, the more combative I become. And then they just knock me out. And then I don't remember much after that. But hopefully to answer the question, all of my memories are just from being conscious. Like I will remember this conversation tomorrow.
Yeah. I think so the comments seem to have calmed down for a moment. So one, I think, an interesting direction is something you'd hinted on last time we had talked, which is an audio podcast everyone should go listen to. It was a fantastic podcast. Is MyLabs, in the Utah-based MyLab system and their government contracting, which is interesting depending on the search engine you use. Looking into them, one of the things that had come up for me was their DOE contracts. So, but they have a lot of government contracts. Would you care to expand on that? Because you mentioned it in reference, and I don't know how many of our audience are familiar with what's there, what in that connection that you're saying is there.
Yeah, for me, it might be a little bit different than what most people think about when they think about MyLabs. So when we think about MyLabs, it's a military abduction. So quite often you're going to find abductees who are scooped up after an alien abduction, the actual real military, not your average guy, who's your brother who's serving, but these are, Black SAPs, and your average abductee, they'll get picked up. I think Melinda Leslie, who's our resident MyLabs expert, would say it's maybe up to 40% of the so-called alien abductees are re-abducted by the military. The military is trying to figure out what is the message, what are they telling you, what tech did you see, what information was downloaded into your head, what's going to happen in the future, what are the plans. They're interrogating the alien abductee for information. There's also an aspect of them trying to find abductees who can help them reverse engineer these craft, abductees who can fly these craft, and not only just craft, but other tech. And so, and then you also have abductees like Bridget, who remembers as a child being in the GATE program and then being recruited, for lack of a better word, into projects like Stargate and Looking Glass. So there's a lot of different things going on. So military abductions are not just one thing. There's a lot.
And by my labs, you're referencing the military labs and military, not my labs in Utah that does they have about 25 years of government military contracting for medical. Yeah. There's also my labs, the education program. Yeah, there's so that's what I'm trying to be specific about, because these people will research it themselves. And without clarification, they're not going to get it. Yeah.
They're not going to get it. Yeah. And so, and there's even, I've even brought up in my own spaces, there was a woman who was upset about that term because it doesn't reflect well on our average everyday on our troops, who are just out there actually dying for this country and for our freedom. And so that word military abduction, it's not a great word, because a lot of these are Black projects, and it's being run by contractors. So it's not a good word, but it's been around for a long time, long before I ever heard of it. And I'm not sure it'll change anytime soon, but it is important that people understand that when we say military abductions, it's not, your brother who's enlisted.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's like I said, it's just important for the clarification. When you reference my labs, you're referencing the military industrial complex working through the government to isolate and track, not specific company, my lab.
Right.
Who
exactly.
is also involved in medical research, oddly enough.
Wow. Well, that's quite a coincidence there.
Isn't it though? Yeah. So that's just bringing that up. Next question start by Hammers. Are grays a common denominator in abductee experiences?
Yeah, they are. I think you guys asked me on the last one, how often do you see the grays? And I think I said 25 to 30% or something. But what's important about the grays, and what's actually important about all of these so-called aliens, is they can actually project as anything they want. And so even though I'm only seeing grays 25, 30%, they could be looking humans. They'll project being humans all the time. That happens a lot. Can you put the question back up? Or does it kind of disappear?
Oh, no. Oh, yeah, we can put it back up. I think you hit it. Yeah, are grays the common denominator?
Are they the common denominator? I think they're a common denominator. I will go weeks longer without seeing a gray. And so it seems like what's been happening, especially over the last, I don't even know, maybe 10 years or maybe longer. They're making these hybrids. And so while the grays used to do almost all of the abductions and all of the, taking clothes off and getting onto the table, etc., those tasks are actually seem to be getting taken over, at least in many cases, by hybrids. And these hybrids, you wouldn't even know the difference if one was sitting next to you unless you could feel the psychic power coming off of it, or you felt its mind control. So when I first found this community of UFO Twitter and first started talking to abductees, this one particular abductee I've already mentioned, I told her, I said, but you don't understand. I'm seeing so many humans. And they can sometimes look a little funny. They have this, thin hair, and their eyes might look a little strange, and they have kind of a flattened effect. But they look human. And these are the hybrids that they've created. So what's happened is these hybrids have kind of stepped up into the grays jobs, and the grays have moved on to higher level jobs, and where they're kind of relieving the hierarchy of their menial tasks. So grays are a common denominator. I'd say it's the most recognized of all the so-called aliens is the gray. And I think that 10, 15 years ago, they were probably seeing the most. But you have a lot of people now seeing what they perceive as humans. And that's concerning in and of itself. Because now, how do you differentiate? Unless you're in that environment, you can actually feel the psychic power coming off of them, and you get a knowing that it's a hybrid, or you get a knowing that it's a human. It can be very difficult because you have hybrids dressed in military uniforms too, to get back to the labs and to get back to how convoluted and how much overlap there is here. So if you have an alien hybrid dressed in a military uniform, imagine an abductee going, well, the military was there last night. So, there's so much overlap.
The idea of the hybrids looking like people but different does that give like an Uncanny Valley type feeling? Because I've often Uncanny Valley, it's the feeling you get when you see something like like a really good waxwork or something like that, or a video game character that kind of looks and moves like a human, but it's not because it's not real. I've often wondered whether we have this feeling of like unease when we're around things that look like people, but we know they're not people, like say, be it like a waxwork or some sort of movie special effect or video game, because it's some sort of deep-rooted like natural fear we have for things that look like us but aren't us.
Yeah, that could get interesting in regular 3D life. Because they're here walking among us, as I think we probably all know by now. But on the ships, when you come across a hybrid, so in their environment, everything is telepathic, and so there's just a knowing. Now, they can give you a knowing that is actually a deception. So just because you have a knowing, just because you're in a telepathic environment and you just know something, that doesn't necessarily mean you can take it at face value. But in their environment, coming across hybrids, a lot of times you could feel the energy coming off of them, and I can get a sense of whether it's a hybrid or not. So the Uncanny Valley thing, I just kind of know it's a hybrid. Where some confusion can come in, and this has come in for myself, is they could be hybrids, they could be what people call Nordics, they could be future telepathic humans, but these are creatures that come across as very human energy, for lack of a better way to say it, but they're telepathic. That for me is probably the disturbing part, where I start going, okay, what is this I'm dealing with right here? If you start coming across hybrids in average everyday life, I could totally see some people being able to pick up on it. Something's just not right, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Marcus Fishlock, member of the show, said, so would she or has she taken a lie detector test for proof of the story?
Would she? Of course not.
Yeah.
Have I? No, of course not. I mean, I'm not that I'm aware of. If some kind of government project or something came up where they asked for volunteers, I've actually volunteered. I'm already on someone's list, and I don't have a whole lot to lose. So.
There you go. I'm just catching up on the comments came through in a tizzy. He said, just call me Marcus. Okay, Marcus.
I think someone will have to correct me if I'm wrong here, because I know they're having some sort of tech issues, but yes, ask Fringe what, and I think he's trying to ask, what are the aliens? I think that's what he wants to know.
So I think they're probably more than one thing. The reason I don't call them aliens, or if I do call them aliens, I put it in quotes, because I think when people think, UFOs, or they think aliens, ETs, extraterrestrials from outer space have traveled, from some faraway planet just to maybe investigate our planet or something like that. But I think most of these so-called aliens are actually made right here on Earth, created right here on Earth. And I think that they were created for a purpose. And I think they could very likely be avatars for non-corporeal beings, for lack of a better term. And so these aliens have an ability to go back and forth between what we would call the 3D, our 3D reality, and the 4D or the astral realm, or the spiritual. They have this ability to be in either place and kind of go back and forth, and their craft have the same ability, I think. So I think they're from here. I think, your average everyday mantid reptilian greys were probably created for the purpose that they are right now carrying out, which is this hybrid agenda. I think that there's much more of a breakaway civilization type thing going on, potentially with some humans who have maybe survived a cataclysm or two, might also have this kind of tech. I think a lot of them are just living right here on Earth underground, and they're not from outer space or other planets at all. I think they've been here with us for a very, very long time, thousands of years at minimum. And so when I put aliens in quotes, it's just because I do not think that these are extraterrestrial space brothers visiting us from the Pleiades. And by the way, I used to think it was. And I want to touch on that because when I realized that this was happening, when I transitioned from my whole life of these shadow beings, and I realized that I'm seeing aliens, not just shadow beings. When this first was happening to me, and I was really wrapping my mind around it, first of all, it was not something that I accepted even for myself. It took me a long time to accept this for myself. But once I did, and once I was wrapping my mind around it, I really did think that these were our space brothers from outer space. So that's something important to know.
Yeah.
There are hundreds of experiences with varying aspects of this phenomenon. I changed my mind. And I realized that they're not from outer space and that they're from right here. And I think there's a 3D nuts and bolts aspect to it, but I also think that there's a spiritual aspect to it. So behind the scenes of the aliens is actually, in my personal opinion, is a spiritual warfare. And it's a literal cosmic battle between the light and the darkness. And again, I'm aware that everything I'm saying here today sounds absolutely nuts. And all I would like to ask from your audience is just to keep an open mind and ask yourself if it's possible or if it could be true.
So I think that leads into a good one for Chuck's last chin. So he asked this a while ago. So what do we have for as far as proof or cred for Fringe? This is my first time coming across her, keeping an open approach. And since we're about an hour in and we can see our view count and where it's at, we always pick up at this point. If you wouldn't mind giving people, like, you're retired law enforcement, correct?
Yeah, I actually had an entire career in law enforcement, believe it or not.
And you were taken credible enough by prosecutors, attorneys, and judges. In many cases, I would take it. Lots of time in the courtroom, lots of time swearing oaths, testimonies, filling out reports, proceeding through the legal system. And throughout your 20 years in law enforcement, all those around you found you as sound mind, incredible enough to arrest, lock away, put away people, and be given those powers, correct?
Absolutely. And thank you for wrapping that up for me, Dave. I appreciate that. That was awesome.
Yeah, I like to touch on it, go through. And I get what people ask, because so much of this is like, people are like, well, where's the hard evidence? If we had hard evidence, we wouldn't be having the discussion here.
Yeah.
It would be somewhere else. Something about this phenomenon. Like, if you look at just this one experience I laid out earlier, right? Just talking about my daughter and what happened. At that same moment that when happened, our entire electrical system, the security cameras on its own thing, everything blipped. Right? Like, that shouldn't have happened. Even the part of the security system that is not connected, right? It's battery powered, it's backup, that blipped in time. And somehow she knew how to undo the old security panel. I got new ones, but which was weird. Like, I didn't know how to do that, and I'm kind of the person who would know how to do something like that. But yeah, the phenomenon is bizarre. Anyway, rolling through questions. Ask Fringe if she thinks.
I'll answer that real quick.
Yeah.
So I think, contrary to popular belief, we have a ton of anecdotal evidence. If you
I think so as well.
If you're willing just to look at the abduction research and read stories from people across the world, different types of cultures, different ages, all, by the way, sound mind, being investigated by a psychiatrist as well. we're all saying the same thing or a variation of the same thing. And so just that in and of itself is enough, I think, for anyone who picks up the abduction research to stop and make them think that this actually could be happening. Just the sheer number of, go ahead.
I was just going to say, people need to remember, like in a court of law, if you have enough people with anecdotal evidence, you will take somebody's life away from them, and you will incarcerate them for the rest of their living life off the say-so of enough people.
That's right. And I think that if you took the totality of the abduction research and you put it together with, even airline pilots and professional military pilots, and you have the testimony before Congress, and you take all of the little things that's in the research that, frankly, I'm not as familiar with as the historians are, someone like a Richard Dolan, somebody who's collected all of this research over the years. If you took that all into court, you'd be hard pressed to have people saying, at the very least, man, something is going on here. So unfortunately, a lot of our evidence as abductees is anecdotal, but anecdotal evidence is, in fact, evidence. And it's important to pay attention and to be aware of it. Now, is it proof? That's a bit of a different standard, to have 100% proof that something is going on. And so if I have my own experience and I wake up in the morning and I know I'm being meticulous, because it takes a bit of being meticulous to actually even have enough evidence for your own sound mind or peace of mind. If I know I put my pajamas on this way and I woke up with them on inside out and or backwards, or if I wake up with grass in my bed or blood on my pillow or all of the above, I can then put those puzzle pieces together for myself. And I can say for myself, okay, this is happening. Now what am I going to do about it? And so if you have millions of people like me, this is happening to, who are gathering these little pieces of evidence for themselves, all coming together saying that this is happening, I think it's at least enough to move from being completely skeptic to that just having an open mind and asking yourself, is this possible? Could this be happening? Now, for me, myself, for people who study this stuff, those people need to move from possibility to probability because there's just way too much out there. But just for your average everyday person who, I understand this sounds absolutely ludicrous, pick up a book. Pick up something by David Jacobs, Carla Turner, John Mack, any of the researchers out there, and read it and ask yourself, keep an open mind, is it possible that this is happening? Because even though the evidence is anecdotal, there's a whole lot of it. And you should be able to pick out, the signal from the noise. There's something there.
So every now and then has a question, Fringe series question. Why are aliens allowed to take our souls and minds out of our bodies? Are there good protective spirits or aliens? I don't know. It's a question.
This is the doozy. So this, I think I mentioned on the last time we got together, this is the thing that threw me into an absolute crisis, spiritual crisis, a worldview crisis. So I started out thinking these were our space brothers. And when I really started paying attention, and it was only the sheer number of times that I was having these experiences, is why I think I was able to figure anything out at all. I started realizing they were transferring my soul. And I know it sounds insane, but by the way, there are actually patents filed by the military industrial complex to actually transfer the soul out of the body. So that's up there. When I realized they were transferring my soul, that's what really got to me. I thought, okay, why are space brothers transferring my soul? What does this have to do with aliens from another planet? Why are they interested in this part of me? Why are they trying to figure out what makes me tick? Why are they, in some of my experiences, I came to have the knowing that they were actually trying to reverse engineer the soul in some way or possibly hijack it for themselves. There's still a bit of a mystery as to what they're doing with it, but they are very much interested in it because I think this is what separates us from them. And so why are they able to do it? Let me read this. if she thinks they're able to affect the minds of those they interface with, how do they get to the soul from that? Was there a soul question?
I think it was a bit back. But you got to it as,
So now
as
we
best
have
as it,
to-
yeah, as best as it could be.
Hopefully, I answered some of that original question because the question.
Yeah. Yeah, well, these ones they kind of blend together, and like the effect of the program of minds, or why they're allowed to take people's souls out of their body.
Why? Yeah, why?
Yeah.
You tell me.
I think it was for those that didn't listen to our original show, which again you can go listen to it on audio now on the on podcast. I found you when you were on the Confessionals podcast, and I think on that podcast it was referenced that if people can astral project, you know, and they can put their own minds outside their body, and that's possible to do, then why wouldn't it be possible for something that lives in that realm anyway to rip you out of your body? You know, it's if you can open a door, you can kick it down.
Yeah, and that was a good point. I think Tony probably brought up that point. If I remember.
Think so.
But this was what actually sent me into a full-blown crisis when I realized that they had this ability. Now, when I look at the abduction research and some of the other research that's out there, our own military industrial complex has a patent filed for the same technology, and they're doing it as well. So this is just technology when it comes down to it. But why do they have it, and what makes them interested in it? I think is a whole other question. You know, why do they care about this part of us? Why are they using human women for these hybrids? You know, there's an idea that they actually can't reproduce themselves. That idea actually goes back thousands of years too. Their hybrid females don't even, you know, let's see, this was maybe 10 years ago, that they were not able to carry to full term. I'm not sure what the progress is at this point. But why are they using human women for just a few weeks to create babies, and then taking them out of the human woman and putting them into these vats of liquid where they grow for the whole rest of the time? What is it about some type of metaphysical process that can happen inside a human woman's body that can't happen inside that vat? So why do they have this ability? I don't know. But, you know, Tony did make a good point. If our government can do it, why can't they do it? These creatures have near-death experiences. These creatures have threatened insiders with implications in the afterlife. So there's definitely something very spiritual going on. Religious people or Christians would call it in the spiritual realm. Your more New Age people would call it the astral realm. So they definitely have some type of authority in that realm to do what they're doing, it seems to me.
Yeah, it's interesting. Given Zero Fox, has Fringe heard retired CIA John Ramirez account of potentially being hybrid in his slide deck he got approval to show?
So I have heard a few of the things he said, specifically about this year coming up, 2027. Generally speaking, I have heard people claim to be hybrids. So there are a lot of abductees or contactees or experiencers who believe that they're hybrids. Give me just a second to check the top, which is not going to be pleasant and pretty.
Uh-oh.
I'm not sure. Anyway.
Sorry, I'm back. I had a cough.
Okay,
so I actually had this conversation with somebody yesterday. So abductees, and if anybody has ever seen the hierarchy of beings, that might have even been John Ramirez who put it out. There's the aliens, and then there's the hybrids, and then there's the abductees. But there's a difference between hybrids created on the ships and then your average everyday human who might have had some genetic manipulation while they're paying attention to these bloodlines and their genetics, and likely manipulating them. And so a lot of abductees actually believe they're hybrids. They're told they're part of the alien family. They're told that they're special. They're told that they're above humans, which is, terrible for us to think if that's what's been put into our heads. So do you have, so John Ramirez is what, I don't know what it is, I guess in the 60s or something, 50s or 60s. Do you have people of that age who have been tinkered with over time in certain bloodlines who are born to human women who might consider themselves hybrids? Sure. But at a whole other level are these hybrids that have been created on the ships and actually being integrated into our society. So
it makes it all the more plausible too when you think of things like CRISPR, things that we understand. So if you believe that there's an advanced civilization, they're going to have things way more than that. Like we think of a breeding program, but we found out just from CRISPR, modern technology, you can do real-time gene editing on people in real time.
That's what they're doing.
It's something.
So people consider themselves hybrids. I would be really careful with that because now you're identifying with them, and they use that, for propaganda.
Depending on how many boosters they get, I guess. Marcus Fishlock, wouldn't it be possible to determine if a woman was pregnant even after the fetus was removed? Yeah, there'd be hormones.
Yeah,
hormones sustained in the blood system and glandular system firing up.
Yeah, so there are actually women, I'm not one of them, but there are women out there who have actually had a proven positive pregnancy test, even with an ultrasound, and then have later gone back and that pregnancy is now gone. And typically what happens is doctors will tell them that their body absorbed it. Of course, if you never got seen yet by a doctor, people are just going to think, oh, the pregnancy test was false positive or what have you. But there are women out there who have seen a doctor, verified a pregnancy on ultrasound, and then have gone back to the doctor for a checkup, and that child is gone. So again, I know these things sound outrageous, but when you really put them all together and you understand the number of women out there this is happening to, I just ask that you keep them in mind.
Yeah, it's also an interesting thing when we talk about, like, you'll hear it a lot of people say, well, there's no evidence, there's no proof, there's no history, there's no record of these things. But there is. I mean, just like you hear it with implant, like there are medical records. There are, was it Jeremy Corbell did a whole documentary on it, Patient 17, where they pulled a piece of metal out of a guy's knee and got it analyzed by SEAL Labs, which they do nuclear measurements for radioactive materials for governments all over the world, energy power plants and whatnot. And they determined it was an incredibly rare, had to be artificially made isotope that would be extremely difficult.
Yeah,
and was in this guy's knee.
Lear had pulled out, I think, 200 implants before he died.
Yeah,
something.
And no one talks about those things. So, no, and everyone's like, "Oh, it was a piece of a nail." The SEAL Labs got it wrong. Now they do the uranium and the plutonium testing for the Department of Energy, who actually owns all the nuclear weapons, and they do that on a regular basis to see how good that is. Now they're good enough to do that, but every little piece of metal comes in, they just screw that up. No, they have their entire reputation riding on it. Right, like they're not wrong. So
and that's what happens. Unless this has happened to you, as an individual, unless this has happened to you, even if it's just been a paranormal experience, something supernatural, something, especially Dave, what happened to your daughter. Unless things like this are happening to us, you personally, it's very difficult to believe. But when you start putting all these pieces together and you understand the enormity of the so-called evidence, and I actually will call it evidence. If you really piece it all together and put it into court, it would be very interesting indeed. If you take the physical evidence that's out there, the medical evidence, these women, with doctor's records showing a pregnancy, Lear with his 200 implants, if you just put all of that together, just ask yourself, could this actually be happening? And if it is, why are they doing it is actually the most important.
Strange to address. Marcus, I will do my best, but I think I've called you Fishlock for so long. I don't think I can stop. I got to be real with you, man. You've been on enough shows. I don't think I can stop myself. And back to Given Zero Fox. How did your police department handle your accounts, and did it hold you back during evaluations?
No. So I was actually retired when all of this crazy stuff started happening. I was already retired. Thank goodness. Up until then, all of the things that happened to me from the age of 3 until the age of 50-ish, I looked at as supernatural. And for me, it's supernatural. I mean, I was raised a Christian and I knew things could be supernatural. And so I didn't give it much more than that. It wasn't until I was actually retired that I was putting all of the pieces together. And then I ended up having these conscious experiences that went from shadow people to various other creatures that, you know, were not shadow people, but they could be shadow people with technology. But to your point, I've obviously passed an MMPI even just to get on the job. So
Yes.
I threw that out there as well.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know. I don't want to. I would ask a question, but it'll give too much away, I think, on both sides. But it is interesting that it is retired. You're through that, and we had some comments about that before. I do think it gives credibility, though, through that you've obviously been able to handle a mental state. You've had a sound mental state through all these years, through cases, through convictions, through getting torn apart. Because it's one thing to say things like that tongue in cheek, but if anyone has ever been there with a serious defense attorney and a prosecuting attorney going back and forth, and they're smart men, you know what I mean, or women, or whatever, it can get hairy. You know what I mean, especially when they start calling things into question. So you've stood up, yeah.
I've had cartel attorneys come after me,
Yeah.
so I'll tell you that.
Well paid.
Very well paid, very high level cartel attorneys. That was their only job, was to take me.
Oh, there you go. So here's another good question that I knew I'd saw that. Hammers, is there some sort of statistic that shows if there is a sway in abductions for either male or female? So I imagine that means, is women more likely to be abducted or men more likely to be abducted?
Yeah, so I'm not aware of the statistic. Men and women are equally abducted, but the number of times they're abducted, I think, is not the same. And so I think, I don't know what this platform is, but we've said some other words. So they take sperm from men. So imagine the amount of babies sperm could create. And they take eggs from women, and they're only getting a baby and egg unless they have some other thing going on, to create twins or triplets or what have you. And so they seem to be taking women maybe 4 or 5 times a month for this breeding program, or maybe they'll take a man once a month or once every 3 months or 6 months. I don't have an answer to that, but that's kind of how it appears. So it appears that while we are equally taken, we're not taken as often. Males are not taken as often.
This was my question from before we start the show. It seems like a good time to ask it. I always find it difficult to work out the use of technology from something that might be like supernatural or spiritual being. Have you got any insight into that you can give us?
Yeah, it was really hard for me too, because again, I looked at most of what had ever happened to me throughout my life, and it was mostly shadow people. I looked at it as something supernatural, and I think that was probably a natural and normal thing. I think most people would look at shadow people and call them supernatural or paranormal. And it wasn't until recently, in the last couple of years, that for a whole other story and reason, they started coming too many times. Mm-hmm. And I started being awake during some of these times. And I started actually being able to feel the technology. And so it took me a while, but I realized, wait a minute, this is not supernatural. This is actually technology they're using to get me either out of my body or to bring the entire physical body up into a ship that's actually technology. I think these creatures have a command of physics that we do not have, but I think in the end, most of what religious folks call supernatural is going to be technology. And it's just going to be physics that we just don't get. They have a mastery of physics. They can master the astral and spiritual realm, and they can master the 3D realm. They're really good at going back and forth. When we won't even get ourselves out of a little box and ask ourselves whether any of these things could possibly be true. To me, our science has kept us in these tiny little boxes of reality. And I have said before, the religious folks are going to have it more right than science in the end, because all of this stuff can happen and does happen. I think where the religious folks could end up being wrong is it's probably going to end up being technology that we don't get.
Interesting. You're muted, Dave.
Damn it! Now I did it.
Swing and a miss.
Gotta get Ollie here, man. Gotta get Ollie here. That way he can take all that flack. Welcome to the show. Question: why would agencies be abducting minors?
Why would they be abducting minors? Well, you'd have to ask them, but what they're getting out of the minors is psychic abilities and the ability to astral travel and do their projects. Children, I think, have a capability that we don't necessarily retain as adults, and it just comes more naturally to them. And the MIC is exploiting it from here to high.
We had so Marcus said, well, it's for the Clintons. Or for Biden to sniff, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, no, it is. And what you said about that is it ties right into what was the gentleman's name that Greer had on? Him and his fellow Marines were ambushed by guys in black with guns.
Was it Herrera?
Thank you.
Herrera.
Thank you. Yeah. And they were loading things on a ship, and he later came to find out that it was people. Right. Yeah,
and I think I might have touched on. I don't know if I touched on this on or off air during the last podcast. To Herrera's points of this human trafficking, it actually all goes together. And I'm sorry to say it, but a lot of these conspiracy theories or things we think of as conspiracy theories are based in the truth. And I think you asked a question earlier about how was I chosen? I wasn't chosen. I was cursed. Like I said before, but how does this stuff happen? Well, it is generational, but on my father's side of the family, he was running an international human trafficking ring. And he was trafficking to people we would definitely call elites, who actually rose up pretty high into the United States Senate. One of his very close and frequent clients. So to Herrera's point, a lot of people say about Herrera is, oh, this is silly, this can be happening, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just telling you, don't take anything off the table. This stuff absolutely could be happening because it's all related. The human trafficking, the so-called reptilians that are supposed to be fake, rituals, demon worship. One side of my family was very heavily involved in the occult and in human trafficking, and in all of these little rumors that sound, get relegated into conspiracy theory realm. My family was actually doing it, so I can tell you it's actually real, and at least some of it is true. At least the basis of it is true.
You still have family members practicing?
Practicing
extended relatives.
Practicing
cult rituals.
There's no doubt. My biological father is still alive, and that's a whole other story.
Still going down that left-hand path, then, is he?
He most definitely is.
Yeah. This is a disjointed question, but I think I understand what they're talking about. The question is, because we had referenced earlier that Lear had removed 200 implants. So there's a few documentaries out there talking about that. Budokan. You can definitely check that out. Patient 17's Jeremy Corbell's. He talks about it a lot in that. Most of those people didn't really have things going on. They had like Patient 17 specifically, he had what he believed was an alien abductions experience. He thought it was a very bad dream or a nightmare that was continually plaguing him that led him to believe he had something in him. And it drove him to find Lear. And when they did the x-rays and scans, they in fact did find something where he thought it was going to be. They cut it out. It was connected to some nerve tissue and whatnot. It was a whole, even the doctor removing it from him was absolutely bizarrely mystified of how this thing wasn't inflamed. It wasn't having a bad reaction. It was integrated with his function. It was a very small function, but definitely involved in his function. So there's documentaries out there that explain to that and why each person went to it. There's not like a one quick answer that's gonna solve it for you. If there was a quick answer for any of this, there wouldn't be any podcasts on this subject matter.
Well, that's true. If this person is interested, or if this person is on Twitter, they can look up an abductee named Eric Mitchell. And Eric Mitchell is still on UFO Twitter. He's still working with scientists, trying to back engineer some things and coming out with this, more evidence for abductees. He was supposed to be patient 18, and Lear actually died before he could actually become patient 18 to take out his implants that are actually still there. So again, this is stuff, you take Pizzagate and human trafficking and reptilians and implants and alien abductions, and it all sounds absurd. And please understand, I absolutely know how absurd it sounds. And especially if you want to put them all together, because they are all related. People don't want to understand it either. Just keep an open mind. Just keep an open mind.
We've definitely talked to interesting. I know I have on the side. I'm sure Lee has as well. Like, people would have an amazing story, and when I say, I do a podcast with some friends just for shits and giggles, I'd love to have you come on. You can be anonymous, and they immediately shut it down. It's like, no, I have a real life and things to lose.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot have people start calling me crazy.
And that's part of why I'm here. So I'm here because I can be here. I'm here because I don't have a lot to risk. I don't have a lot to lose. I'm not some kind of, superwoman or anything. I have just passed the point in my life where I have to worry about my job or about being called crazy. Or, there have been abductees who have lost child custody disputes, who have gotten fired, they've gotten divorced. I was in touch with a gentleman whose wife is an abductee, and he wrote to me and he said, "Oh my gosh, I cannot believe what you're talking about. I thought my wife was schizophrenic, and I took her to the doctor and asked him to put her on medication because she was saying the same exact things I was saying." And he now realizes that she's telling the truth because just one other person was able to speak up. And I'm not the only person, but I am in a unique position where I don't have a whole lot to lose. Nobody's going to take a paycheck away from me. I'm not going to get fired. I'm hopefully not going to get locked up in the loony bin. So it's important to understand how much this is happening, how much it's affecting people. I've had abductees write to me and tell me they were within 5 minutes of taking their own lives because they felt so alone and so isolated, and they know this is happening to them, but they can't tell anybody because they know how crazy it sounds. We are all well aware of how crazy these things are. I might speak about it in a very matter-of-fact way because this is my life and this is what's happening to me several times a week still. But we are all well aware of how crazy it sounds and how crazy we sound. And that's why more people are speaking up about it, because they know how crazy it sounds.
So, yeah, definitely. So Marcus comes in with a question. So demons or aliens?
Both. It's both. So if you look at the alien hierarchy, beyond these metaphysical beings, for lack of a better term, when you get up that hierarchy, you're going to see the more spiritual beings and the less corporal beings, and demons definitely fall into that hierarchy. So the demons are actually above the aliens on the negative alien inclusion, which is another thing that most people are going to reject.
Yeah. And another one to jump to would be DW. Do you think any of these entities were here before modern humans? Life has been on Earth for a very long time before us.
Yeah, I think it's entirely possible. So how long have these so-called aliens been here? I don't know. But the creatures that created those things, I think, have been here before us. Yes.
Good answer. Given Zero Fox, what does Fringe think about UFO Twitter? Are there bad actors hiding things, and why?
Ooh, hiding things. Well, so UFO Twitter is a double-edged sword. At this time last year, UFO Twitter saved my own sanity because all these things were happening to me. I hadn't, come across any of the abduction research. I hadn't met any other abductees. So finding that community actually saved my own probably emotional health more than anything, because I was able to connect with other people this was happening to. But it is a double-edged sword. There's a lot of drama in the community. There's a lot of backbiting. Sometimes people want to talk about other people instead of talking about UFOs and aliens. No doubt there are some, DOJ fake profiles, sitting behind a desk, engaging with the community, trying to lead us in certain directions, maybe even trying to cause disputes and drama for throw everybody off track. The question is gone, so hopefully I at least made a stab at answering that.
That's good. So welcome to the show has two questions that kind of go together. So these are going to go in succession. I think one's a comment and follows into the question. It says, according to ChatGPT, 2 million miners go missing in the world every year. Jump down to his follow-up question. Are aliens abducting miners?
Yeah, they absolutely are abducting miners. Whether they're returned or not is anybody's guess. So you have a couple of different things going on there. So I think the statistic in the United States is 90,000 children disappear and are never returned every year. There could be any number of things going on there. It's not all aliens. But you do have abductees like Ted Rice, who has seen these mantids actually consuming human fetuses. So there's that. And then you have just your average everyday abductee begins as a child. Most of us are returned. We are actually serving a purpose. They're using us for these genetics and the bloodlines and these hybrids that they're trying to create, which has taken a very long time, by the way. People say, oh, if the aliens didn't meant us harm, they would have taken us out a long time ago. No, they wouldn't have. They've been actually working on a long-term plan to take us out from the inside out. So absolutely, children are being abducted. My first experience was at the age of 3.5, and the literature is full of women being abducted with their infant children at the same time. Most generational, lifelong abductees are returned because we serve a purpose. There is no doubt in my mind that there are many children not returned. And a lot of them fall into the human trafficking side of things. We could go down some deep rabbit holes and the aliens being involved in human trafficking as well.
Mm-hmm. This is going to be a weird shift. Question about near-death experiences. Do you think that the guys after the tunnel's light that show the subject's life are connected to the abduction phenomenon?
Yes, in many cases I do. I think it would be very difficult once you've looked at the abduction phenomenon and you've looked at the near-death experience phenomenon. It would be very difficult not to see the overlap and the coincidences, for lack of a better term. There have been grays seen during near-death experiences. They will present themselves even on the ships or in an abductee's bedroom as dead relatives, as Jesus, as any religious figure. Right now, you have the Chris Bledsoe phenomenon, and the lady is presenting herself as, Hathor, the Holy Spirit. Many, if not most, I don't know what, it's an extremely high percentage of abductees have actually had a near-death experience, or more than one sometimes in their history. Again, getting back to the idea that the Greys have actually threatened insiders in the intelligence community with afterlife implications. This is partially why they go to their grave with their secrets, because these beings at least try to convince us at bare minimum that they have something to do with the afterlife. Mm-hmm. Whether reincarnation is real or not, they want to convince us that they have at least some type of authority in the so-called spiritual realm or the astral realm. So the guys after the tunnel of light being shown the subject's life connected to the abduction phenomenon, yes, I think it's all very much the same.
Personal question from Marcus. Is she religious? Doesn't have to answer. You don't have to answer.
Well, I like to think I don't have to answer anything, but I am
correct.
for questions.
Or
So,
feel obligated in any way. I think that's the better one, right?
yeah,
Ask
I
questions
don't
through obligation, or answers through obligation.
absolutely. I don't want to. I
No,
mean,
you
if
don't
I
have
felt pressured to answer something I didn't want to, I wouldn't. So I'll try to be quick with this. I was born into a Christian family. I was raised a Christian. I was baptized very young. I was a Calvinist. I mean, probably the most conservative type of Christian for most of my life. I would have told anyone that my faith could move a mountain. There was no question in my mind about the scriptures, about God, about Christ, about the resurrection, about the death on the cross, about the whole thing, the entire thing. So I was a Christian throughout my life, throughout having these shadow people experiences. When I was in my 50s and I realized that the shadow people were actually involved with aliens, and I had to wrap my mind around that. I truly believed at that time that these aliens were our space brothers from outer space. I thought they were extraterrestrials. I'm not sure if I mentioned this on the last podcast, but somewhere during that time, I came across Ray Boucher. And if you guys have never looked him up, he's definitely worth a look. Ray Boucher is a paranormal investigator, but he's also a pastor or minister. And I came across Ray Boucher talking on, I think the podcast is called Cultish. And he was putting aliens into this category with demons. And I remember listening to him and thinking, that's not true. That's not at all what I'm experiencing. These are our space brothers. These things are from outer space because this is what they fill our heads with this stuff. And I just outright rejected that this had anything whatsoever to do with demons. But I was a strong Christian at that time. I would definitely call myself a strong Christian. During that whole next year, I actually went into an absolute complete spiritual crisis. I actually disconnected from Christianity altogether. I had to ask myself, am I a Christian because this is how I was raised? And or am I a Christian because I believe this is true? Now, even though I believed it was true, I didn't want to be a Christian just because I was indoctrinated into it as a child and never questioned it my whole life, right? So I actually had to stop and disconnect from everything and actually just go back to basics and ask myself, how does this all fit in? How can this all work? Because the church hid so much just from me as a person. The church never talked to me about aliens and about shadow people and about demons, etc. And so what happened was in about October, November of 2023, I completely disconnected from my religion. And I actually went down several rabbit holes and several, ancient alien theory, version theory that, Satan in the garden is actually God or the good one on the good side. I actually went down many, many rabbit holes. And I ended up coming out of those rabbit holes after many more experiences with these things. And I actually come out of that and realized that Christianity actually has a lot of truth. And while they're not telling us the whole truth, which I am resentful for, by the way, I end up coming right back to Christ. And I would call myself a Christian today, absolutely. I think I have a much wider view than most Christians do and that I used to have. But yes, I consider myself religious and I call myself a Christian. I do find value in a lot of the world religions, and I think ultimately the world religions will have it more right than the science does.
I think that's well said. It's definitely a good take. I fall into that as well. I've definitely bebopped around to come back to where I am now. Given Zero Fox, how does Fringe rate simulation theory on the continuum of possibilities?
Well, on the continuum of possibilities, I put it up there very, very high. Very high.
Good.
We're living in one right now. And
how we define simulation, right?
It is. I had a space the other day, and Tom Montauk, the UFO community will be familiar with him. You guys might not be, but he said he likes to call it a construct. instead of calling it simulation theory. And I think he's spot on. I would call it a construct.
Yeah. Does Fringe think we are going through some sort of fundamental change to human civilization?
Ooh, that's a good one. So, you have a lot of new age thought out there right now that we're going to ascend, to 5D, that we're having an awakening. There's even thought of a split in humanity, some people being transferred off the planet to this new Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And I find it really interesting that a lot of the new age, well, first of all, a lot of the new age thinking actually comes straight from the aliens themselves. It's alien propaganda based in truth. So don't anybody fry me. It's based in truth, because a lot of the new age concepts are actually based in truth, but they just turn it into propaganda and they use it for their own purposes. So I find it all very interesting, because then you can also look at some of the prophecies in Christianity. You can look at the Hopi prophecy. You can just look at, there's something like 500 cultures around the world predicting some type of an awakening of humanity, some type of a cataclysmic change coming, and then some people disappearing from the planet and starting all over. So I don't discount any of it. I like to just gather all the puzzle pieces from anywhere I can, and without throwing out anything. And the question is no longer there, so I'm not sure if I answered that.
Oh yeah. Well, you definitely got to it.
So
They were
I'm
just
sorry.
asking if you thought there was some fundamental change to human civilization.
Yes, I do. I do. Where we end up, that's going to be a tough one.
I don't know. I'm curious to see the results as things go through. I'm interested. The thing that interests me the most is I've held this spiritual connection to this alien phenomenon and the phenomenon in general, right? Whether it be paranormal or alien and crypto, how they like to break everything up. I've always kind of lumped it together. I've noticed a lot of other podcasts doing the same. Maybe not to the greatest extent, but I know Lee and I and Ollie, we talk about it in a chat that it is striking to see people start talking about the aliens and the demons and are these things mixed up somehow, and it going as far as the UFO world goes, kind of in a mainstream way, where before that was always the pariah on the edges. Like you said something like that, and even amongst the crazy people, you were crazy, so it was extra shamed. How do you feel about that? What do you think? You think I used to always think that was the way, and now that I'm seeing so many get on board, I'm like, maybe I was just deceived earlier than they were, because that's when I start to worry.
So maybe on the fringes, this is out there. So I had a space with Tony Merkel, and he's all about Dogman.
Yeah.
And I was shocked at the amount of overlap, because I have no idea what Dogman. I didn't know what Dogman is when he came onto our space. I watched 2 or 3 shows, that week to catch myself up on it. The overlap between Dogman and the werewolves and all these cryptids, it's uncanny. Talk about Uncanny Valley. It is uncanny. The abduction phenomenon with aliens and these cryptids, they also have a really weird overlap MyLabs component where these cryptids could be getting, created in MyLabs. But for the most part, people in ufology, there's maybe 2 camps. So if you look at the really high up insiders, they're all religious. They're all Rosicrucians. They're all Freemasons. They're in the OTO. Not my kind of religion, actually the inversion of my religion, but they're all very religious. They know what this is beyond a shadow of a doubt. And there's levels of knowledge, right?
Yeah.
But if you look at your average everyday person in ufology, they are still very much caught up on the science and on having to prove through science that this is real and happening. And they're very much still caught up in the extraterrestrial hypothesis. These are creatures from outer space. This is a higher level consciousnness. They are here for our own good. By the way, they're here to transcend us into 5D. They're here to help develop the human consciousness. This is a pervasive thought, I would say, in ufology, unless you're an insider, and then you know exactly what's going on.
Yeah. It shocks me how many people will dismiss certain things as woo-woo and cast it aside. And you'll find that among, the average ufologist, whatever, that we're looking for nuts and bolts. We're looking for the physical. We're looking for okay. And then you get to people in government or with government clearances or people who do hard things professionally for a living, and you find out how they are all woo-woo. Yeah. They're like, did you have a bad dream last night? Yeah, we're not going out on mission. Why? Bob had a dream. It didn't go well. Tell him about it, Bob. Oh, yeah, we're definitely putting this off for now. And then, it's crazy to see how many things are really ruled that way. I've always found it interesting, especially, when I met up with Lee and Ollie in the beginning, and we would talk about various things. And through them, I got to meet more people who are more in the normal UFO community and paranormal community, whatever. And just the disconnection from people who have, doctorates and Q clearances, and they're all about the woo.
Oh,
they're all about the woo.
What's going on?
Yeah.
And it's interesting to me because, this community, it is a double-edged sword. I love it. It's a fantastic place to be. It's a great place to meet other people who are going through what I'm going through. But at the same time, these people who sit around trying to figure out whether UFOs are real all day, and actually what they're waiting for is government disclosure.
Correct.
Experiencers come into their room, or you have a whistleblower. So you have a whistleblower like Jason Sands. In my personal opinion, we have not had a more credible whistleblower, although I am very new to the topic, to be honest with you. And everybody's fine when he shows his DB-214 and when he says, I worked this and I worked that, and people actually confirm that he actually did indeed work these certain programs that he claimed to be part of. But then when Jason Sands says something like, yeah, I was traveling through the desert on base and I saw an alien in a spaceship, and I don't want to trash his story. Let him tell it for himself. Oh, come on. This guy has no credibility. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He's a grifter. He's a liar, et cetera, et cetera. It's a disconnect. It's incredibly mind-blowing to me sometimes.
Yeah, grift is the most overused word on UFO Twitter.
Why would a man like that put his reputation on the line and confirm and back up the story? I mean, if somebody asked me, can you, prove that you were in law enforcement for X number of years at certain police department, major metropolitan police department, and yes, that I was grilled by cartel attorneys, I could in fact provide you with that proof.
Yeah.
He's put his ass on the line, but when he gets to the so-called woo, which is why we're here, everybody wants to throw him under the bus and say that he's batshit crazy. It makes no sense to me at all. We have people like me, hundreds, I think, at least I think we have at least 100 abductees right now on UFO Twitter, who, when they get up enough courage to come into a space and talk about their experiences, liar, grifter, attention seeker, yada, yada, we literally have disclosure right here for you to serve it up to you on a platter. Mm-hmm. But if you want to talk about anything having to do with the so-called woo, you must be lying, you must have a psychological condition, you must be lying. The disconnect there is sometimes mind-blowing for me. I do not understand it.
I just don't understand where people's curiosities disappeared to. There was a time where we could only watch things like DVDs and videos and shows would come out, and people would lap it up. We would watch hours and hours of different things. Now the world is so much more connected, so there's so many more people we can hear stories from, and there's so many ways of getting in touch with those people and actually communicating with them rather than just watching a video and going, oh, that was really interesting. You can go and speak to these people, and instead of having conversations about this sort of stuff, we just want to attack people, and it's really weird. It's really weird.
It is so weird. People sit around all day waiting for their disclosure, and someone's willing to, it takes a lot of courage to talk about what happens. And nobody wants to be called crazy. Nobody, I see Tupa there. Tupa was the very first space I ever came into on UFO Twitter. I will always be forever grateful to Tupa, Logan, and there's a gal named Ocean on UFO Twitter. Mm-hmm. They gave me a place where I came into their space, and I spoke for maybe an hour. I don't know how long it was, answered a bunch of questions. And it was so therapeutic for me. And just to be able to tell my story, just to be able to tell somebody what was happening. And yet that's not how it always happens. You have people like Tupa and others. There are several others in this community who are willing to listen. But gosh, the whole rest of them, they just want to call everyone a grifter and a liar. And what do I have to gain at this point? Do you know that there are people who spend all day in chat rooms talking about me being a liar and a grifter? Exactly what do I have to gain by this?
It seems curious that they spend that much time, isn't it? Because
Oh,
we've noticed that we've commented on certain people that it's like,
crazy.
you've literally been doing this for about 13 hours. That's
It's
amazing.
nuts.
I can see the history. Yeah.
Again,
on that stuff. I just don't get it. I just think, do you have nothing better to do? And by the way, what do you think I'm gaining out of this?
this is the thing. Yeah.
Yes, apparently I'm gaining attention and I'm gaining clicks because apparently you can become a millionaire on UFO.
Yeah.
We're still waiting.
I became more obvious of this sort of stuff after the shows we did with Ashton talking about the MH370 stuff, and regardless of what people think about that or where you land on those videos and stuff that really kind of doesn't matter to this. But the fact is you've got people out there that are just coming forward with something, they're saying something, and then you've got people that are really genuinely attacking them, and then they'll turn around and say, yeah, well, they're misleading people. I go, okay, how does this affect your daily? Like, why have you decided that you are this pillar of altruism that has to go out there and defend people that you don't know even if they really exist, because all they're doing is watching a YouTube show? It's just weird because all these people are doing, they're just doing the same thing. They're just gaining clicks. But the difference is, instead of having people which come forward and create something, and like either it be content creation or whether it be just creating stories for people to listen to and come forward with their own experiences, these people are doing the exact opposite of that because they're gaining clicks through destruction. They're just trying to destroy other people.
Burn it down. Yeah. Transfer to this question, and the follow-up question to this from someone else I think is going to lead to an interesting point I'm going to make, kind of talking almost exactly. But Given's been waiting a while. Has Fringe ever tried to engage directly with her abductors? Are their methods being tried?
Absolutely not. I will not. I won't give an inch. The more we engage with this, the more license it has over us. That's my personal opinion. And there are methods out there, but you're going to have to get them somewhere else. And, I apologize for that, but it's not going to come from me.
Yeah, no worries. This is a good one. So we can't seem to listen to stories, and this is his comment. I'm going to comment on the comment. We can't seem to listen to stories anymore without thinking people have agendas, call BS, call grifters, etc. I'd always like to go make ridiculous demands constantly when someone's trying to tell and interrupt. Why can't we just listen, respect, make our own opinion without hating on them?
Sounds like a man with an agenda.
Oh, definitely. He's grifting. And this is a point I've made on this show with past guests and other times, and it's usually always someone in the comments coming up. And this is me 100% agreement with that. Someone who wanted to know, like, we keep saying my labs, what I mean, which we need to clarify that is military labs, not necessarily the my labs that's in Utah or the my labs that works for the various colleges through access portals, because there's a lot. It's MI labs, military labs, correct? And then with that, we also have like the national bases of science, the national labs, of which there's several in the United States. There's 9 total. If you really wanted secrets for those people who are obviously driven to investigate, it's always baffled me that people don't move to an adjacent area of like outside GPL, or outside any of the research labs, because it's not just nuclear research. I mean, there's particle physics, it's government funded, like the Department of Energy funds, I believe it's like 85% of the physical sciences in the United States. And I believe they fund a huge chunk worldwide as well. That gives them access to the best technology, best research, whatever. So if you're into that topic, these are the people who are going to know. They're all clearanced up. So I'm going to lay this out for you, everyone listening. Should you ever want to become a super sleuth, what you need to do is you move to that area. All right. It's going to have to be in the U.S. because this is going to be your best way in. You're going to draw a nice little radius around those labs of about 50 miles. Find every local firearms range. You're going to start going to those. You're going to see if they have any shooting teams for shooting competitions. There's various, IDPA, whatever. Then you're going to start going to those. You're going to make friends. The majority of those guys are going to be the security guys that work out at those various labs, right? Because they like to shoot. It's people are into it. They're into it. Especially with that. Make friends with those guys. And in 6-7 months, they're going to start telling you interesting things that they have witnessed. Now, they're not going to go on the record about it because they're not going to lose their clearance. They're not going to lose their job. But I promise you, if you're having a couple beers and you've been shooting with them, they're going to go, hey, man, you're not going to believe this. And they're going to go into it. And you know what? They're going to know a nerdy scientist who likes to go shoot and go out with you. And he's going to say, dude, there's a fucking one-way particle accelerator down there. It just goes down. It's like a mile underground, and it's not a ring. It's one direction. He's like, well, how do you know that? Well, we built a containment, magnetic ring holder or whatever for it. And you're going to start putting things together. You're going to get things no one else will get. Like, there's ways they can do it. It's better than just sitting at home waiting for someone like us to talk to you and then disbelieve us or call us names or whatever. Like, if you're really that passionate, go that direction. Just saying. Just putting the for instance out there.
It's a great advice. Great advice. And then they don't have to spend their time on my page calling me names all day long.
Exactly.
Yes.
They could go find it. They could go find it. Oddly enough, I actually live near Tony Merkel.
Oh, love that guy.
I have yet to meet him. I've messaged him, but I don't know. Well, maybe I'll bump into him at a grocery store or something. So I don't know. Weird. Anywho, we've been going an hour and 57 minutes. We don't want to capitalize on too much of your time there, Fringe. This has been a great podcast. This has been wild. This has been an excellent time. Lots of questions. We would love to have you back again because I know we're going to get messages and it's only going to generate more conversation topic. If that be all right
thanks
with you.
for having me. I appreciate it. And yeah, anytime even I'm answering questions, there's 10 other ways to go. I might answer one part of it, but there's so much more. It's a never-ending topic, really.
Yeah. Before we bow out, I would ask one thing. My question to you would be, what do you think the one thing people should be paying attention to and they're not is?
I would
on
say
this topic.
On this topic, definitely the spiritual side. Definitely the religious side, the spiritual side, versus these are aliens from outer space and they're just here to give us some technology and upgrade our consciousness and take us off the planet for our own good. I think when these aliens, if they ever do show themselves, people like to blow off the ontological shock, but I don't see any way around it. And my message to people would be, don't take it at face value. If they claim to be aliens from other planets, just here, give us a little boost. Just keep an open mind and ask yourself if that makes any sense at all. So I think the spiritual side of it is very underappreciated, and also the overlap between the paranormal, supernatural activity and the alien phenomenon. It's all related.
Awesome.
Where can people find you to either get in touch with you or find out other stuff about you?
Yeah, the only place to find me is right there on X, Twitter, at fringe.com, right there under my picture.
And the links to your website and that are in the comments below. Thanks very much for coming on the show again. Anyone else that really enjoyed this, they can go and listen to the first interview that we did on the podcast. Buy a t-shirt, like and share, do all those things. Make sure you hit the like on the video on your way out the door. Other than that, thanks for coming on, Fringe. It was great last time. It's been great this time, and I look forward to speaking to you again.
Thank you very much, both of you, and the other gentleman was here last time too.
Cheers, guys.
Ollie's not a gentleman.
No. He's barely a man with those hands.
I wouldn't call him a man.
They're
not with those
so
hands.
Small.
They're
so tiny.
Freakishly small hands.
Like
he should be in a circus. He'd be a performer if this was 100 years ago.
It's like Garfield's mum fucked a T-Rex.
Billy gets picked on even when he's not here.
I know, yeah. It was close then. He nearly didn't get picked on.
I'm glad we got it in.
Yeah.
Continuity.